What if everything you've been told about the Federal Reserve is a lie? What if the greatest threat to the middle class isn't war or politics, but a quiet plan engineered inside the Fed's marble halls? You feel it already, the shrinking paycheck, the rising rent, the price of groceries climbing faster than your income. They call it inflation, they call it policy, but what if it's neither? What if it's a deliberate transfer of wealth, a strategy so complex it hides in plain sight? Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, because this community is global, and we're connecting dots that the news won't touch. And if you're done with the filtered version of reality, subscribe. Because what follows is the unfiltered truth. They promised stability, they promised protection. Yet since 2008, every promise from the Fed has ended the same way. The rich rebound, the poor rebuild, the middle class disappears. Today's 2025 plan, no one whispered about on investor calls and hidden in bland policy languageizing tea, a rescue. It's the final stage of a decades-long financial experiment, and its target isn't Wall Street, it's you. To understand how we got here, we have to rewind. Back to 2008, the moment everything changed. The crash of 2008 wasn't just a housing collapse. It was a controlled demolition. Trillions in toxic mortgages detonated, credit froze, and Wall Street stood on the edge of the abyss. Then, the Federal Reserve stepped in as savior. Its balance sheet, once under $900 billion, ballooned past $4.5 trillion in just 6 years. The Fed didn't just buy bonds, it bought time. They called it quantitative easing money creation on a scale never seen before. Bonds, mortgage-backed securities, anything to keep the machine running. Sound familiar? Because after every temporary emergency, the same thing happens. The rich find new ways to multiply wealth. The middle class watches their savings erode. And the Fed calls it stability. But the truth? Each bailout rewired the system until risk stopped meaning anything. By 2014, the headline said, "Recovery complete." Markets were soaring. Unemployment was down. The Fed promised to normalize, but behind those numbers, debt kept swelling. Student loans crossed $1.5 trillion. Corporate borrowing hit records. And derivatives, the same instruments that blew up 2008, quietly multiplied again. Then came 2020. The world shut down. Markets froze. And in one weekend, the Fed printed more money than in its first 100 years combined. The balance sheet rocketed toward $9 trillion. $9 trillion. They said it was emergency liquidity. They said it was temporary. Sound familiar? Because temporary became permanent. And those trillions didn't flow to small businesses or workers. They went straight to banks, hedge funds, and asset managers, the same institutions that caused the last crisis. If you ever wondered why home prices doubled while wages barely moved, now you know. Let's draw the pattern. 2008. Housing crash leads to bailouts. 2014. Recovery leads to bubbles. 2020. Pandemic leads to mega bailouts. 2025. Inflation leads to a policy reset. every crisis ends the same: the middle class footing the bill. Sound familiar? The Fed didn't just fight fires, it created a dependency. Markets learned one lesson: risk whatever you want. The Fed will save you. That's moral hazard, the economic virus that never got cured. And by 2025, it's mutated into something even more dangerous. Officially, it's called balance sheet normalization. Unofficially, insiders call it the silent guarantee. Here's what it means. Instead of letting markets correct, the Fed quietly created new lending channels, hidden credit lines for Wall Street institutions. Not the Main Street bank where you deposit your paycheck. The shadow banks, the private equity giants, derivatives dealers. Because behind every rate hike headline, there's a backdoor deal. Letting big money borrow almost free, using your economy as collateral. And that's the twist. The Fed didn't just intervene in the market, it became the market. When the dust settles, you'll see it clearly. The Fed's 2025 plan isn't about stability, it's about control. It's about turning liquidity into leverage that binds every mortgage, every pension, every dollar in your account to Wall Street's next gamble. But the full extent of what was unleashed in 2025, you won't believe the name behind the ledger. The receipt is wilder than you think. Subscribe right now, and you'll see exactly how the Fed turned your home, your savings, and your future into invisible collateral for the next trillion-dollar bet. The truth is only getting started. Since 2008, every crisis has been a funnel, siphoning trillions of dollars upward and leaving the middle class hollowed out. But that was just the warm-up. Today, we're pulling back the curtain to expose how the Federal Reserve's grand plan is transforming your savings, your mortgage, and your retirement into collateral for their final reckless gamble. This isn't a rescue operation anymore. It's a sophisticated wealth extraction system disguised as monetary policy. Let's start with the hard numbers. Before 2008, the Fed's balance sheet was under $900 billion. After the bailout, it ballooned to $4.5 trillion. And after 2020, it skyrocketed to nearly $9 trillion. That's a staggering 1,000% expansion of control in less than 2 decades. But here's the real trick. Every single dollar added to that balance sheet became an implied promise guarantee that the Fed would always be there to buy assets, to rescue failing institutions, and to print more money. Imagine the entire financial system as a giant casino. Now, what happens if every gambler at the table knows the house will refund all their losses? They bet bigger. They take insane risks. Why wouldn't they? The downside has been completely eliminated. And that is precisely what Wall Street has been doing. While you were busy working, saving your hard-earned money, and paying your taxes, a parallel financial universe was constructed right under our noses. They call it the shadow banking system. It's a world of hedge funds, private credit firms, and obscure financial vehicles. These entities don't take deposits like your local bank, and they certainly don't follow the same rules. But they borrow colossal sums of money, often drawing liquidity directly or indirectly from the Federal Reserve itself. These shadow banks take that borrowed money, package it into complex debt products, and then trade derivatives on top of those products, placing bets on the bets themselves. Every new layer adds more leverage, and with it, more hidden danger. And because the Fed implicitly guarantees liquidity, no one seems to care about the teetering tower of risk underneath. This is where the entire system begins to fracture. When money is cheap and rescues are guaranteed, a sickness called moral hazard infects everything. Why would anyone act responsibly when recklessness is not only tolerated but actively rewarded? Between 2020 and 2022, the Fed pumped trillions in reserves into the banking system. Even later, when they claimed they were tightening policy, those reserves never truly disappeared. The result? Every major player on Wall Street got the message loud and clear. If it all blows up, the Fed will fix it. So, they borrowed more, speculated more, and leveraged themselves to the hilt. And when inflation inevitably hit record highs, who paid the price? It wasn't the traders. It wasn't the billionaires. It was you. You paid for it with your groceries, your rent, and your energy bills. That's the invisible tax, the real cost of moral hazard. Let's call inflation what it really is, a mechanism for wealth extraction. While the prices of everything you need go up, your wages struggle to keep pace. Your savings account loses its purchasing power day by day. But for the asset owners, the wealthy elite, it's a different story. Their stocks, real estate, and investment portfolios inflate in nominal terms. This isn't a random outcome. It's simple arithmetic. If the dollar buys less, debtors win. And who are the biggest debtors on the planet? Governments and massive corporations. Savers, the very backbone of the middle class, get absolutely crushed. This is the plan. They inflate away their monumental debts while shifting the burden onto anyone who earns a living in dollars instead of owning assets. Every month, your paycheck buys less, your savings shrink, and while your home's value might rise on paper, just try to sell it. You'll quickly realize it's all just leverage built on a foundation of sand. Now, let's dive even deeper into the abyss, into the world of derivatives. These are financial contracts whose value depends on something else, like mortgages, bonds, currencies, or interest rates. They are the invisible glue holding this fragile system together until they suddenly snap. Back in 2008, the derivatives tied to bad mortgages totaled around $60 trillion, which was enough to nearly collapse the global economy. By 2025, the total global derivatives exposure is estimated to exceed $600 trillion. That's nearly 30 times the size of the entire US economy. A single small misfire, one chain of defaults, can now send catastrophic ripples through every pension fund, every retirement account, every dollar you think you own. And when that happens, the Fed won't be coming to rescue you. They'll rescue the institutions that caused the problem again, because your 401k, your mortgage, and the money in your bank account are already the collateral for their high-stakes bets. In 2008, the crisis was centered on Wall Street. Today, the risk is everywhere. Capital moves at the speed of algorithms. A single hedge fund collapse in London can trigger margin calls in Tokyo. A bank runs across Europe, and mass layoffs in America in an instant. The Fed's liquidity plans don't just cover US banks anymore. They underwrite the entire global financial superhighway. This means when the next crisis hits, every household, every small business, and every saver will be tethered to the same imploding machine. There's no firewall. There's no escape hatch. There's just one colossal global balance sheet, with the middle class sitting right at the bottom, left holding the bag. The Fed's strategy isn't just a policy, it's a declaration. It's a statement that permanent liquidity is the new normal, that markets must never be allowed to fall, that risk must always be socialized, while profits are privatized. But systems built on these principles don't end peacefully. They end in collapse. Because when money loses its meaning, when debt becomes infinite and accountability is zero, collapse isn't a question of if, It's a question of when. And when that moment arrives, you can bet they'll blame it on unexpected volatility. They'll hold solemn press conferences. They'll look into the cameras and say, "No one could have seen this coming, but you. You will know better. Because you did see it coming." If you believe your savings are safe, think again. If you think owning a home means security, think again. Your home isn't just a home anymore. It's collateral. Your savings aren't just savings. They are fuel for someone else's leverage. The next collapse will be faster, more global, and far more unforgiving than the last one. So ask yourself, are we any wiser now? Or are we just walking down the same treacherous path again, only this time in better suits? If you refuse to be a pawn in their game, share this video. Let us know where you're watching from in the comments. And be sure to subscribe, because this channel is your firewall against their narrative. The truth doesn't fear the light. It only fears being ignored.